I've spent the last 6 years using my background in science and learning from all the brilliant experiences I've had with my students. And now I've left the old style of teaching and taken the plunge to create new ways to grow myself for my students. The real question is, how will I help other teachers ditch the old mindset without rules or laws completely from scratch? This podcast is here to give you the answer. Join me and follow along as I learn, apply, and share real tested classroom strategies to grow my abilities and strengths using only today's best practices. My name is Juan Campos, and welcome to Seal It With a Smile, Self-Driven Radio. And welcome to Seal It With a Smile, episode 58. Thank you for breaking destructive cycles. My name is Juan Campos. Thank you so much for joining me today on the podcast. Whether you're checking me out on YouTube or you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, wherever you're listening, make sure you hit that subscribe button so you don't miss another episode. Today, thank you for breaking destructive cycles. I know we've all been in our homes, and maybe some of us are slowly starting to come out from quarantine and checking out life and seeing that there's other human beings on this planet. But on top of that pandemic situation that we're all dealing with, we've also been seeing a lot of Black Lives Matters movements happening, not only here in our country, but literally all over the world. And I'm sure you've seen some in your own backyard. It's been really inspirational for me to see all these, not only young people, but just people from all different backgrounds and generations, and just this movement that's really, really starting to come about. And a lot of positive things are coming about it as well. And it's been so inspiring. And it just makes me think about, what are we going to do in the classroom? What are we going to look? How are we going to approach things in the classroom when we come back in the fall? And so this podcast is really just about a little bit of a history lesson, but really it's more about just understanding that we are definitely part of these racist systemic systems that are in place. And I'm not saying that we are actively being racist in the classroom or that the educational system isn't racist per se, but we have definite roots in a few different veins that have come together to form what we know as our educational system. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So real quick, before I ever stepped into a classroom, I went through PD, right? What everybody's PD is going through. And I went through a professional development that was all about cultural sensitivity, and me being Latino. Well, I kind of thought it was okay, thought it was going to be necessary, but I felt like I had enough understanding. But in actuality, it was very, very enlightening, because I couldn't just say, well, I love everybody and I love all the kids and I don't see color, because that's not really what it's about. We need to honor and be respectful of the fact that there are different people from various backgrounds, and whether you're Black, Hispanic, Latino, however you want to identify yourself, we are all different in that makeup. We're all human beings, but we need to at least understand each other based on the fact that we have different life experiences. And that was a really great training. I learned a lot from it, especially since I wasn't formally taught or trained. I really came from industry into the classroom. And so this was a really awesome experience for me. And then my principal gave our the usual speech before classes start, and talk about data, talking about targets and what we're going to do this year and all this kind of stuff. And at the end, I remember him saying, "And thank you for helping us break poverty cycles." And that literally, I mean, I even remember the feeling right about here in my brain, because my brain just wrinkled like a little bit, because it just changed me. It almost immediately changed my mind, because I just felt as though at that moment I didn't have a job anymore. I felt as though I had a mission. I had something that I had to accomplish. And why was my brain so ready for that? Why was I so receptive to the idea of, okay, this is something that I need to do. This is something that has to happen. Well, we got to go back a little bit, right? So I was trying to buy a house at this time. And me being me, I'm very inquisitive, I'm very nosy. And I started to dig up some information about the FHA, which is where I was going to get my loan from. Well, the FHA is a Federal Housing Administration, and it was created in 1934. And since 1934, it's processed about 40 million mortgages. Now, sounds awesome, right? But between 1934 and 1960s, the majority of those mortgages, the majority of the people that received those mortgages were white. And in the FHA policies, remember, this is a federal government agency. In those policies, there was specific verbiage where they openly denied Black Americans or really anyone of color from getting specific loans, mortgage loans for buying homes. Now, two effects. Number one, there was a practice called redlining, which came from this. And basically, when you look at a map, you saw sort of where these houses were, and certain mortgage companies were not going to were not going to lend money to people of color in these particular areas or in these particular areas. And so we ended up seeing or creating literally white communities separate from communities of color. And here's the other part. The other thing that happened was because of this redlining, most white people that were in the inner city or that were living in the city started to leave the inner city and started moving to the suburbs. And again, because of the redlining, these suburbs weren't just brought up out of nowhere. They were specifically planned communities that were being built using this redlining model. And so the neighborhoods were being segregated. And so you had literally white neighborhoods and then you had Black neighborhoods. Because of this loss of white people, the inner city and also income, the inner cities became more and more impoverished because there's another layer that we need to talk about. And that is the GI Bill. Okay, so remember, we're talking 1934 to the 1960s. So that's the end of World War II. Baby boomers, the 1950s, the 1960s, and all that kind of stuff. Now, the GI Bill was after World War II, right? And the GI Bill gave the opportunity for literally 8 million Americans, veterans from World War II, to go into college, to get universities, get your bachelor's, master's, PhD, whatever. Because there were so many people coming back from the war, there wasn't enough jobs. So they felt, okay, if we put at least some of these people or the majority of these people in school, that'll give us some time to create more jobs, or at least by the time they're out, they'll be qualified for higher paying work instead of everybody fighting for factory work or that kind of thing. So GI Bill was made, and here's the issue though. And this, I'm just gonna read this. It's from an article on history.com. If you want the references for this, make sure to go to sealwithasmile.com. That's where the main website is. Click on this episode, and all the links that I'm referring to are in the notes for this show. So I'm going to read directly from the article on history.com. It says, by the time the original GI Bill ended in July 1956, nearly 8 million World War II veterans had received education or training, and 4.3 million home loans worth about $33 billion had been handed out. But most Black veterans had been left behind. As employment, college attendance, and wealth surged for whites, disparities with their Black counterparts not only continued, but widened. There was, writes Keselton, there's a link to his article, no greater instrument for widening an already huge racial gap in post-war America than the GI Bill. Today, and this is referring to 2017, today, a stark wealth gap between Black and white Americans persists. The median income for white households in 2017 was $68,145, according to the U.S. Census. For Black households, it was $40,258. That's almost $30,000 difference between a black household and a white household. Now, when you combine the racist practices of redefining the FHA for years, for decades, okay, so they literally created these segregated neighborhoods, and then the unequal distribution of the GI Bill among millions of American veterans, because again, Black Americans didn't get the same opportunities. And here's another part, because so many of these Black Americans also probably came from poor areas, they didn't even feel they had the confidence to go into higher ed. So then there was already strikes against them on that end. That led to this huge divide in wealth and achievement and opportunity. And this was the beginning of that. And we're seeing this, generations later, the results of all this disparity, of this huge gap. But now, now I want to add a third layer. And that third layer is property taxes. Because here's the thing. Most of these segregated areas in the United States, so because you have these really wide segregated areas and cities all over the US, you have to remember that the majority of a school's budget, about 45% of a school's budget, of a district's budget, comes from property taxes alone, just property taxes. But you gotta understand, when you look at a district or when you look at a city and where these schools are being built, the property taxes from lower income areas are also a result from little to no business investment in those areas. Whereas you see in wealthier schools, those wealthier schools are usually in more affluent areas, mainly because those affluent areas bring in good or higher amounts of property tax income because there are more businesses and more investment in those areas. So even our schools and the way they're funded and where they're located, those are all symptoms of FHA and the GI Bill in essence. And this is what we see in our classrooms. And here's the thing, it doesn't matter whether you teach in a really wealthy area of town or in a wealthy district or you teach in a poor district. Regardless, we're still seeing and feeling the effects of these systems. So here's the thing. Yeah, you deliver content. Okay, you are in charge of the content. You are delivering content. You're teaching. You're the master of your content area, and that's your job, right? You get paid to deliver content. That's your task. But the mission, the mission, the end goal, what you're actually truly doing it's way grander and much more noble. Because when you show kids kindness and validation, okay, especially kids or your students of color, you're not just being nice to the Black kid or the Latino kid or whatever kid. You're not just doing that. You're slowly breaking these systemic racist systems. Because oftentimes kids that grow up in these poor areas or in these segregated areas, they sometimes don't feel worthy that they can have more. They sometimes don't feel worthy of looking for more or thinking bigger or beyond what they're used to. And that mindset, that mindset is very much systemic. It is a product of all these different racist systems that have been literally put in place for decades. So when you validate your children, when you say Black Lives Matters, when you say that, it's important that we do that and that we say that and we acknowledge the children that are in front of you, because you acknowledge that person and you acknowledge their essence. And when you do that, you give them the confidence to dream bigger. And you plant just a tiny, just a seed of hope in their minds and in their hearts. And that breaks the psychological chains. that these racist cycles of poverty and lack of opportunity have wrapped around them. You're literally helping break decades, if not centuries, of systemic racism and destructive cycles. That's literally what you can do, and what you do in the classroom when you are actively engaging with your students, when you're recognizing your students, when you're acknowledging them, when you're just being present and with them. And just like my principal told me, now I'm going to tell you, and I'm going to say thank you. I'm going to say thank you for breaking destructive cycles, because that's what you're going to do in the fall. And I really hope that this has helped you understand just how critical your role is in the classroom, which was already fundamentally important. But now, through this lens of actively dismantling these racist systems, I want you to understand just how important your role is, not only as a teacher, but as a leader of your classroom, as a leader in your area, in your neighborhood, in your community, and as a model for how we should treat other students of all colors, especially our Black and Latino and whatever other color you want to put in student. And here's something else. This is a quote from the American Academy of Pediatrics, May 30th, 2020. Racism is a public health issue. The American Academy of Pediatrics condemns violence, especially when perpetrated by authorities, and calls for a deep examination of how to improve the role of policing. Systemic violence requires systemic response. Think about your kids. Think about your kids who have been watching this news for will be weeks, if not months, by the time we come back to school. Think about the conversations they've had with or they've been listening to around their adults in their lives. Just think about all those things that they're absorbing on top of what we're going through right now with dealing with the coronavirus and all that kind of stuff. I mean, this is an incredible moment for us to truly look at ourselves and realize just how important the way we treat ourselves and the way we treat each other matter. The kindness that we show to our students, the kindness that we show to our children is so vital right now. It's so important. And when we walk into the classroom in the fall, that's exactly the mindset that we need to approach. Kindness, compassion, and modeling behaviors that respect and validate all our students. These systems need to fall down, and they are falling down, and we need to keep that going. So again, thank you. Thank you for breaking destructive cycles. Let's end this. Let's put it to bed, and let's give all of our students of color, let's give them every single opportunity that they have. Let's plant these seeds of opportunity and hope, and let them know and help them be the best versions of themselves that they can be. We can do that by you being the best version of yourself that you can be. So thank you so much for listening. I hope this has helped. You can always find me on Twitter at Seal with Smiles, on Instagram, on Facebook. Leave a comment anytime. And again, thank you so much for checking out the podcast. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button and the like button, no matter where you are, no matter what you do. And don't forget to seal every interaction, to seal everything that you have around you, to seal every interaction that you have with anybody in your life, and seal it with a smile. Thank you so much. My name is Juan Campos, and I will check you next time. Want even more great Seal It With a Smile content? Click the link on any of my social media sites, and there you will have access to my free online ebook, The 5 Seal It With a Smile Secrets. And that will prepare you for my main course, The Self-Driven Classroom. This course will help you develop your self-awareness for a truly transformational classroom experience, not only for you, but for your kids. Remember, you are the most important person in that classroom. Learn to take care of your Maslows for their blooms. Be well, take care, and I will see you in the course.